All right, we are back to digital coloring, and this is what I have so far. Flats here. I'm going to color in the guitar neck here. And if I steal the color from the reference I already have open over here, it's nice to have them open in Photoshop so I can just steal it. I want to get kind of a local color. Looks like a gray. And I can use a selection like this to make that really easy to color in without messing it up too much. I want my opacity to be 100%, but I think I want this color to be a little bit lighter, like that. And then if I like that for the guitar neck, I would carry it beyond. But this is why we spend this time flatting colors. Because even if that color is not what I think is right, just the act of putting it in makes it a lot easier for me to adjust it. So let me demonstrate. Now that I have this color filled in, I can use the magic wand at any time with contiguous turned on and just select that color. And then, while I have the grays showing, I can adjust the hue and saturation of that color. You know, I can push it green. This isn't even making it lighter or darker. I can warm it up, kind of like that, which is what I'm probably going to do. I can take its saturation up or down. Remember that anything I use is going to get mixed a lot with those grays on top. And then I can, maybe most helpfully, lighten it or darken the color. So that's why we flat, so that we can go in and find something better. And what that looks like is that. And that color is hard to choose from there, but you can see how that's kind of the local color of the wood on the fretboard without all of the gray. Now, you should check your dropper settings. And what I like to do is I sample current and below, or current layer. Because if I'm working on the flat local color and I have everything else locked, that means when I sample that color with the dropper tool, it's not going to steal that color with the gray, it's going to go underneath it. So if I want to steal the color of the handkerchief, it will do it, it will match it. So flatting makes this all very easy. Of the shirt, it will do it for me. Of the fretboard, it will do it for me. All right, now what about the headstock of the guitar, the ivory band on the guitar? Again, everything needs to be, all the whites need to be filled in. Nothing should be assumed. Right. Even if it's just a subtle off-white. Pure whites are a choice. And sometimes you have to zoom in. I use Command plus for that. And then if I see that that's kind of the right tone for the ivory, then I can put that in on other parts of the flat color. Like the ivory band on the guitar. And I might even need to go to a smaller brush for that. Very light, careful touch. Hello. And then I can use those on these little pearl inlays too, in the fretboard, and on the ivory headstock right there, on the tuner keys. This is a 12 string. Lots of little details. Seeing different colors, seeing what works. Now the only time you know you're in trouble when you're flatting in whites is when your color just really overpowers the gray value. Otherwise, when you're working behind grays, like I am with the headstock here, even though that color is really strong and bright because all those grays are interfering with it, it's going to be very subtle. This might be what I use for the strings. It's kind of bronze strings that are used on 12-string guitars. I can see that color right there. I kind of want to steal that a little bit. And then are these silver frets or are they bronze frets? Well, I get to decide. But not all details are equally important. So it might seem like a little early for me to be painting in guitar strings, but I'm just exploring the picture right now with my flats and kind of deciding how much detail is needed. Let me mute them a little bit as I get down to these lower strings. Thinner strings that are just catching the light. You can see it in the highlight there a little bit. Right, so those little details are going to make a difference, just to show that there's different textures on this fretboard, different strings on this headstock, different colors between the ivory and the different materials that make up the guitar. Now remember, holding down Option when you use the brush will immediately turn on your dropper tool. Getting lost here. But in order for that to be most effective, you want to set your dropper tool by selecting it to sample only the current layer. Or if you're doing multiple color layers, you say current layer and below. You don't want it to sample all layers because then it will sample the blacks and the grays mixed into your colors. That makes it a lot harder. So by doing that, if I want to steal the color from the ivory, I can do that very easily. And then paint that same local color in somewhere else. And as it goes into more shadow, I still use the same local color, but those blacks and grays are going to help make sense of it. Now I'm going to pretend there's an ivory rim on this guitar. Like that, because I think that looks nicer. We get to be the artist. We decide. If I want to steal the color of the guitar, hold down Option, it's right there for me. And that's why I don't sweat getting inside the lines too much at the beginning, because we keep painting on both sides of them. So we'll define those quite a bit just on our own. I do like how that warm color makes that brass feel. But it should be a slightly different color. So let me see if I put really strong yellow behind it. Does it look more gold? It does, but maybe too strong. so that I can always modify it. Maybe a slightly less saturated version of that. Ah, that looks nice. That fits. I might use that for his ring as well, on his finger. All right, I like this deep red color. Let me see if that's going to translate into this dark headstock. And because it's so dark, not much shows up, but little subtleties matter. That's why we're really trying to replace all the whites. Choose colors for them. Even if it's just with a vague, fill color behind. It's helpful. The metal pins here, make them a little lighter. Even these little ivory pegs are all filled in with a slightly different color. You can barely tell, but it's true. And then just by stealing colors from ourselves, we can finish it off. But there are always going to be areas you've left out, right? So I've got the suit, got the guitar, now I've got to do the skin tones. Got the shirt for the most part. Parts of it look a little sloppier. That looks okay. Make it a little bit brighter on this collar so it differentiates itself from the bow tie a little bit more. Cutting the line of his suit. Okay, now for skin tones, I'm really going to rely on my reference. And I have this old colorized, looks like a poster billing, and then I have a look-alike photo currently, and that shows me there's a lot of variation in the colors of this skin tone. But first, for just my flat color, I just want to find one local color that I can use that really lets all the values come through. So let's see if I can get that. And I'm looking here where the foreground color is. And I'll see that it goes a little pinker, goes a little warmer, goes a little grayer at times. So maybe let's try that. And it's probably a little too dark. I don't know how much of that is going to get faded into his hair. That's going to be a softer transition. But right now, I just want to fill in that empty space with something. Over his eyes, over his teeth, just get a skin tone there. A basic flat skin tone that I can work with. And then once I have it filled in like that, that feels a little too dark. So what I'm going to do is use my magic wand. Again, I'm just on my color layer. I'm going to select it all very easily with contiguous turned on and a default tolerance of 32. Then I'm going to go to adjustment saturation, hue saturation, and I'll play with lightening it. I'll play with saturating it a little bit more. Play with putting a little bit more yellow into it or a little bit more magenta. Until I feel like it's the right default basis color. And that happens to be what it is. And I like that, so I'm going to use that. And so when I color, I will be stealing from that.